Hi everyone, and welcome into an episode of Matt Sports Talk. And I know that I had mentioned in my recap videos from yesterday, recapping all of the Crossroads League games from Wednesday, that I would not be recording another video until Sunday, recapping all the games from Saturday, which I'm still going to do that, don't worry. But I wanted to take a minute today, or actually take a little bit of time today to we're going to do a much different episode. We are going to talk about the national tournament, and we are also going to be talking about the RPI. And of course, I know I mentioned in more detail about the RPI last week, how the formula is calculated, but I wanted to take a few minutes today to dive into that and share with you how that affects your strength of schedule number and how your RPI number kind of affects your RPI number in terms of you going up or down in your RPI ranking, even if you have wins on your season. So without further ado, we are going to dive into that. But real quick, I just wanted to say that for those of you that are brand new to my channel, please hit the subscribe button down below so you're first notified whenever I upload new episodes. And I truly appreciate, pardon me, any feedback that you may provide me. And for those of you that are already subscribed to my channel or most recently subscribed to my channel, thank you so much for doing so. I really appreciate that. And without further ado, pardon me, we are going to dive in. So it's hard to believe that we are literally 1 month away this weekend from the opening rounds of a national tournament. And with that said, I wanted to talk a little bit more about that in terms of, and again, this is a different episode than what I normally do, but the closer we get to the national tournament, obviously, the more videos I want to record and go over all the information with you, which I'm going to do that in the first week of March. And now the first week of March this is the place to be in the first week of March. So please subscribe down below if you have not already subscribed to my channel, because the first week of March, I am really excited about this year. And this was something that I think I did that last year, because I did it last year too, because last year was my first year of doing this, but I'm going to do that again moving forward each and every year. So the first week of March, I am going to be going over with you the final RPI numbers, the final ARC, the final quad records, all that good stuff. I'm going to be going over all of that with you, as well as recapping the Crossroads League Tournament Championship games for both the men and the women. And that's also going to be coming your way that week. And then either the day of Selection Show Thursday or the day before, I'm going to be making my final national tournament predictions based off of the final RPI, ARC, and quad records for the teams, just the bubble teams. Obviously, the teams that are locked in, I'm not going to talk about them, but just for bubble teams only, teams out of the Crossroads League, the Mid-South, and the G-Pack. I'm just going to talk about those three conferences specifically and go over with you just my final thoughts right before Selection Show Thursday night on March 7th. My final predictions based on the bubble teams in those three conferences. And I apologize for my phone falling down. I sat it on one of my bed pillows, and I'm trying to get it to where, okay, yeah, that should work. Trying to get it to where the screen doesn't fall over. But I'm going to be going over all of that with you, as well as going over just the final numbers, and as well in terms of those bubble teams based on their final RPI, ARC, and quad records. So again, please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already done so, because this is the place to be the first week of March. And I really hope you're enjoying my content, and I'm super excited for the first week of March this year, because I'm going to do a lot of exciting things that week, not just doing my daily game recaps, but of course going over fully in-depth coverage of the national tournament leading up to it, and then once we get into the national tournament, creating a bracket and going over my updated record with you after each round of a national tournament. That'll be my second year of doing it. So again, this is the place to be in the month of March, is right here on my YouTube channel. And I'm also going to be sharing links to these videos on my Twitter account. So if you have not already followed me over there, you can do so by following me. My username is @MattJHarden. It's all in lowercase. So please follow me on Twitter, so you are notified whenever I share links to my Twitter page. And now once you follow me there and you see these posts on there, with all these videos, that those links are going to be here, going toward here on my, or will be, those links will be to my YouTube account, or my YouTube channel, I should say. So if you, let's say you don't have the YouTube app downloaded on your device, or maybe you don't have access to a desktop computer or a laptop, but you do have Twitter as a social media account, this is a great opportunity to have that in place, so you do not miss out on any of my episodes moving forward, particularly in the month of March, when we are really going to be talking about the national tournament more in depth. And of course, I'm also going to be looking at the final standings over all of the conferences across the country, making my predictions just based on the final standings, which teams I think would be on the bubble, which teams, and just bubble teams only. Of course, I'll briefly talk about all the teams that are locked, but more in depth, talk about teams on the bubble, as well as just for the bubble teams, and also to talk about their final RPI, ARC, and quad records for all those bubble teams across the country, not across the country, because that would obviously take a lot of time, but just for the bubble teams across all the other conferences. I'm not going to dive into their RPI, ARC, or quad records, but I will go look at the final standings and then make my predictions based off of that. So again, that is going to be coming your way here in the first week of March. So I'm super, super excited about it, and things are going to really be a lot of fun as we head into March. So with all that said, let's dive into, and again, this more than likely will be a two-part video, so just kind of bear with me on this. So the first thing I want to talk about is the RPI, and this is the very first thing we're going to talk about, and because I want to take the most amount of time talking about the national tournament, which teams, again, just in the Crossroads League specifically that are on the bubble, but I also wanted to hone in on some other conferences as well, more specifically the GPAC, the Great Plains Athletic Conference, which one team in particular is getting red hot in that conference that I could see getting an at-large bid into a national tournament. Again, we're going to dive more into that in part 2 of this video. So again, make sure that you stay tuned for that. And then I also will be going over the Mid-South with you in terms of that. Now, obviously, I think for them, 6 out of the 7 teams in that conference, I think, are a guarantee in the national tournament. At least five. The 2 of them are kind of now getting to the point to where they would be on the bubble. So I wanted to hone in on them as well, coming up here in just a few minutes. So the first part, pardon me. So, excuse me. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about was the RPI. Now, of course, if you were with me last week, I did talk about the RPI, how the formula is calculated. Now, if you missed that video, you can go back here on my YouTube channel and click on, I believe I put it under Season 2, Matt Sports Talk playlist for Season 2, 25/2026 season. If I did not do that, I apologize. But if I did not do that, just go to my channel, click on videos, and then scroll down to where I believe I titled the video RPI National Tournament RPI, something like that, RPI breakdown. So you can catch up there in case you missed it when I talked about how the formula and all that good stuff is calculated. Now, I wanted to take a few minutes, and again, this is going to be a part 2 video, no question, but I wanted to take the next probably around 7 to 8 minutes before I record a part 2 talking about the RPI in terms of how does that affect your team's strength of schedule, and if you win a game, then how does that affect it? Well, we are going to answer that question right now. So, for example, and again, I'm just going to use Indiana Wesleyan for an example, and again, it's not because that they're my favorite team, it's not because I'm trying to be biased in any of these videos, because that's not the case. Now, yes, Indiana Wesleyan is my favorite team, that is true, but again, I'm not letting that influence, or I'm not letting it influence my professional take on using them as an example, because I think by using them as an example, I think it's going to be very, very helpful to you. I think you will have a much deeper understanding of how everything works in terms of the RPI, what the selection show committee looks at, and how does your RPI number, how does it change going week by week. So let's dive in. So the RPIs come out each and every week. I know I've talked about that all season long, where I've recorded videos weekly going over the updated RPI numbers with you. And again, the RPI numbers are going to fluctuate. So let's say that your let's say you have a favorite team in the NAIA that you've been watching all season long. You looked at their RPI number all year, and you might be wondering, well, wait a second, like if my team's RPI drops, 4 or 5 spots after just 2 games, well, and then you might wonder, well, that just means that my team is not great this year. Pardon me. Excuse me. Or you might be wondering, well, that means that my team hasn't done enough this year. That is not the case, and I've learned this from not just from pardon me, not just from my own research, but of course I learn by watching other people, not just in person, but also with other online videos, and that's how I learned this and how the RPI is done. So for Indiana Wesleyan, for example, after they beat Goshen on the road Saturday, January 24th, their RPI number dropped 7 spots from 54th to 61st. And then you might be wondering, well, Goshen is the worst team in the Crossroads League. How can Indiana Wesleyan, they just didn't win that game by a few points. They won the game by 19. I think they were like a 25-point favorite. So I thought, okay, well, maybe them dropping 7 spots in the RPI is because they only beat Goshen by 19, whereas when they played them at home, they beat them by 46 points. Well, and now looking after doing some research and watching other videos and learning more the reason why that happened, I definitely understand why. Because after that, Indiana Wesleyan's next 4 games, starting on January 28th, going up to February 7th, were against receiving votes Taylor, which was at IWU, then at number 6 St. Francis, then home against receiving votes Huntington, and then at number 18 Spring Arbor. So the reason why their RPI dropped 7 spots, and it was because those next 4 games were really, really tough for Indiana Wesleyan. Now, despite their RPI number dropping 7 spots prior to those upcoming 4 games, the RPI dropped 7 spots because of how tough those upcoming 4 games were for Indiana Wesleyan. Now, to go along with that, you also had that. Now, on the flip side of that helped their strength of schedule number be the toughest out of everybody else in the Crossroads League in terms of teams on the bubble for the national tournament. So you might be wondering, well, that sounds a little bit weird. Like they dropped 7 spots in that RPI, but yet it actually helped their strength of schedule. Yes, because when your RPI number drops, it doesn't reflect how your season's gone. It doesn't reflect, pardon me, it doesn't reflect how your last few, or how many games you have left. It doesn't reflect any of that. It reflects it reflects your strength of schedule. Because at that time, when you looked at Indiana Wesleyan's upcoming 4 games, all 4 games were against ranked opponents, which therefore that also is going to really help your strength of schedule number, but at the same time, it's going to cause your RPI number to drop because of having 4 tough games in a row. Now, Indiana Wesleyan went 2-2 in those 4 games. They beat Taylor at home, they upset St. Francis on the road, and then they lost to Huntington at home in that double overtime heartbreaker, and then they lost in an overtime heartbreaker to number 16 Spring Arbor on the road. Then you look at their last RPI. Of course, now the new RPI numbers are going to come out Monday, but this week's RPI number, Indiana Wesleyan, was 48th. Previously, they were 40th, so they dropped 8 spots, right? They dropped 8 spots in a week's time. Now, they did lose 2 games in that time frame, which was to Huntington in double overtime and then Spring Arbor in 1 overtime period. Now, you might say, okay, well, they dropped 8 spots in the RPI number. That must mean that must mean because they lost those 2 games. That is not the case. Now, while it may have been a slight reflector of the fact that they lost those 2 games in a row, that is not the primary reason why. Because after losing those games, coming into this week, they had 2 upcoming games against Mount Vernon Nazarene and Grace. Two of the worst team, 2 of the 4 bottom teams in the conference. That's pretty self-explanatory, right? You had 2 upcoming games against 2 of the 4 worst teams in the conference. That's not going to help your strength of schedule number. But if you look past those 2 games, Guess who the last 2 games were against? Number 4 Marion and Bethel. Both at home, by the way, at Indiana Wesleyan. Both at Indiana Wesleyan. So you look at the fact that, oh, well, they dropped 8 spots in the RPI. Now, because 2 out of their last 4 games were not just against Quad 1 teams, and not just that, but 2 of their final 4 games, 2 of their final 4 games to end the regular season are against really, really good teams. Good, stiff competition, one of which a top 5 opponent. Now, losing 8 spots in the RPI, that also helped Indiana Wesleyan's strength of schedule number go up even more. It helped them be 6th in strength of schedule going into these 2 games this week. Now, they, of course, beat Mount Vernon Nazarene Wednesday by 21 points, and I mentioned yesterday I was at that game. Fabulous game. Mount Vernon Nazarene gave them a run, but Iowa was too good in the end. Now, if Indiana Wesleyan beats Grace tomorrow, do I think their RPI number will go up? I would think so, but it's not a guarantee. Why? Because the final 2 games are against Marion and Bethel. The first one is against a top 5 opponent. So, on paper, you would think, okay, well, Indiana Wesleyan's RPI number may drop a little bit, but at the same time, their strength of schedule number should go up 1 or 2 spots because their very next game is against a top 5 opponent. That is very true. So, for example, let's just say that Indiana Wesleyan drops 2 spots, let's just say, and they drop to 50th. If they win that game against Grace tomorrow, if they lose that game, I think they're probably dropping down to 55, 56. I think. Now, with that said, if that happens, I think their strength of schedule number is probably going to go up to either 4th or 5th because their final 2 games are against Marion and Bethel. If they win those 2 games, which, again, Marion, that's going to be a super tough game. But if they win that game against Marion and win the game against Bethel on Senior Day, then they're going into the league tournament, their RPI number is going to go up. It probably will go up, let's just say 10 spots, I think. Now, the next RPIs are going to be coming out, I believe, next Monday, right before the Crossroads League tournament starts. The final RPIs are going to come out the day of the Crossroads League championship game. So in other words, for championship games in the Crossroads League, you don't have to worry about that. It's not gonna help or hurt your RPI number because whatever happens in those Crossroads League championship games, that is not going to affect your RPI. It's just not. Which makes sense. So that is an more in-depth look of the RPI and how that affects your strength of schedule. And I really, really hope that this content was very, very helpful to you. And if you did enjoy it or find it very helpful, please either give me a like down below, comment, or subscribe to my channel. Any one of those options helps me out greatly. Thanks so much for tuning into this video. And when we come back in part 2 in just a moment, we're going to be talking all things national tournament, which teams are on the bubble, specifically in the Crossroads League. But we're also going to hone in on a couple of teams in the Mid-South, and we're going to hone in on a couple of teams in the GPAC, because I'm going to talk about those 3 conferences specifically, either the day of Selection Show Thursday, giving my final predictions based on their final RPI, ARC, quad records, and all of their team statistics as well, in terms of just the bubble teams only in those respective conferences. So we are going to have a great conversation coming up momentarily. Can't wait to dive in, and I'll see you then. God bless.